It's Mahia May.
I'm gonna show you how I flip this to this. Yo, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Danny Mahia, aka Mahia Made. Today, I'm back with another sample flip challenge. How it works is I'm gonna go to the website samplit.io and I only get 10 chances to find a sample. So let's get into it. All right, y'all. So I'm here at the website. I'm gonna go ahead and go through the 10 samples, and when I find one, we're gonna head back into the DAW and take a listen. All right, y'all. So I went through all the 10 samples. Not gonna lie, this one was a little harder because I did come across a lot of soul and jazz samples. But the one I ended up going with is The Windmills of Your Mind by Horst Jankowski. So let's head back into the DAW and take a listen to what it sounds like. So the first thing we're going to start off with is the drums. So first off, we have this kick right over here. Next up, we have the snare. For this snare, I really liked the bottom end of the snare, but I still felt it was missing some of that top end. So what I did is layer it with another rim shot. That way the first snare fills out the bottom end while the rim shot fills out the top end. So let's hear how they both sound like together. So far we have the kick and the snare. They all sound like this. So let's dig into the effects. So as you guys can see, both the snare and the rim shot are both routed to this buzz channel right over here. The first effect I have is this fruity soft clipper. Next up, I added this RC20 retro color. I went to the distort knob right over here. I chose the crunch type, but I only raised it up by 20%. So it's not overly distorting the snare and rim shot. So with the effects turned off, the snare sounds like this. And with the effects turned on, it did take away a little bit of that brightness from both of the samples, but I do think it sounds more fitting with the kick. Next up, for the chorus section of the beat, I wanted to add just another element. So what I did is added this hat loop. So that way, once we get to the chorus section, both kick, snare, and hat loop sound like this. So after that, it's time to get to the bottom end of the drums, which is this 808 right over here. So now with all the drums together, they sound like this. So that was the drums. Now let's get into the backbone of the beat, which is of course the sample. So this is what I chopped. I'm going to play just a little section of the sample where I took this chop from. And of course, you guys know the VST I use to chop up the sample is Serato sample. As you guys can tell now that Serato sample is open, what I ended up doing to this sample is pitching it down 5 semitones. The next thing I did to the sample is I deducted a lot of that low end all the way up to 140 hertz. And then I took off that top end down to 10 kilohertz. So now that we had the backbone of the beat, which is the sample, that was just the foundation. That was my starting point. I wanted to make this beat very cinematic. So what I ended up doing is adding this piano right over here. The VST I use for this piano comes from FL Keys. I use the dark piano preset. So let's start digging into the effects I added for this piano. The first thing we have is this fruity balance. Next up, because I play the piano a little bit on the lower octave end, one thing I did so that the piano doesn't clash with the 808, what I did is put the mode into mid side. I took off the mid, which is a lot of the low end from the middle channel, and then I boosted the side channel. So now both the piano and the 808 can live together. The last thing I did, I deducted that low end down to 90 hertz, and then I shaved off that top end down to 8 kilohertz. Next up, I wanted to add some ambience to the beat, so I added this synth right over here. The VST I use for this sound comes from Hive 2. I use the AZ Carbon preset. And the only thing I did is deduct that low end up to 165 hertz. Next up, I added this sound. So again, the VST I use for that sound comes from Hive 2. I use the HS Bloom Pad preset. So to make the original sound a lot more interesting, I ended up adding 2 plugins. The first one is Tremolator by Soundtoys. I use this preset right over here. And next up, I added one of my favorite plugins, Pancake 2. I boosted up the mix up to 35% and I put it at 1/8 beat sync. And lastly, I shaved off that top end down to 10.5 kilohertz. So let's play what we have so far, which is the sample, piano, and texture sounds. Now it's really starting to sound like a full beat. Next up, as I was making the beat, I kept hearing a guitar sound throughout the beat that was playing in my head. So what I did is go to Splice and I found this sample and I chopped it up once again. Let's listen to what it sounds like. So let's quickly run through the effects I added for that guitar sample. First thing we're going to start off with is this ROM reverb plugin. Next up, I added Tape Mellowfy. I put it at the Lo-Fi Quiver preset. And then finally, I use Pancake 2. Once again, I have the mix at 20%, but this time the beat is synced to 4 bars just to give the guitar some movement. And then finally, I deducted some low end up until 138 hertz and shaved off that top end down to 8 kilohertz. Next up, during the verse section, I wanted to add another element so the beat can start progressing and become even more cinematic. So I added this pad sound. So the pad is playing the same notes as the piano. The only difference is I'm playing these pad sounds as a chord triad. The VST I use for this sound comes from Korg Trident. I used this preset right over here. So the only effect I added to this pad sound is M auto pitch. I didn't use this plugin For its auto pitch capabilities, I actually only used it to widen up the pad. And then lastly, I took off some of that low end up until 90 hertz. So I'm going to quickly play the piano and the pad sound together. Next up is not a Mejia made beat if there's not some type of melodic element to it. So I added this piano right over here. The plugin I use for this piano sound comes from Labs by Spitfire Audio. I use the Tape Piano Tape Head preset. The only effect I added to this piano is a ROM, and I turned up the mix up 62% so you really can feel that reverb. And then lastly, of course, I deducted that low end up until 90 hertz. Next up, I wanted to add another sound to start differentiating the verses from the chorus section, so I added this synth over here. The VST I use for that synth comes from Diva. I use the LD Porta Insulide preset. For this one, I also just shaved off a little bit of that low end. And then finally, I added just one more texture sound, and this is what it sounds like. For this sound, I use the VST Access 2, and I use the C-Drone preset. Alright y'all, so that was it for this week's sample flip challenge. I'm going to quickly play the whole beat so you guys can hear everything in context. Alright y'all, so that was it for this week's sample flip challenge. Let me know how I did in the comment section down below. If y'all gained any type of insight from the video, please leave a like, please leave a comment. It's really going to help the channel grow. If you guys are new to the channel, I put out 4 videos a month. That's 2 beat breakdowns, a sample flip challenge, just like I did today. And I also break down my own samples. So I'm going to catch y'all next week for a new video. Stay blessed.